Okay guys, this first slide talks about GDP. GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. That is the total value of all goods and services produced in a nation over a specific period of time. Think about it like this. Think of GDP as the nation's income, or how much money they make. It is basically how much of a certain product or all products that are being produced by the United States or by a country in a set period of time. Now usually it's going to be a year. Usually they measure GDP in a year. And basically it's used to show the health and future health of a nation's economy. So think about it like this. If you're producing a lot and you have a really high GDP, that's usually a sign that your economy is doing very well or will be doing well in the future. Some of you know this from class today, but for those of y'all that might have missed this, the United States has the highest GDP in the world. Okay, it's like, I think we looked today, it was like $15.6 trillion a year. That's very high. That is the highest. Per capita GDP, which is the last little bullet on the slide, is the total GDP divided by the number of people in the country. So basically what you do is you take the total number of people, or you take the total GDP, divide it by how many people you have, and that gives you a per capita or per person GDP. They use that to measure, just along with gross domestic product itself, they use per capita GDP to measure how well an economy is doing also. Okay. Today, the big thing we're going to focus on is these what we call economic indicators, or ways to measure how well an economy is doing. Okay, so GDP is the first way we measure that. The second is called CPI, or Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index shows monthly changes in the price of goods and services by monitoring the price of things usually purchased by consumers. Okay, what they'll do is they keep track of how much things cost and how much of that certain good is being bought by people. The reason they do that is they use it to measure inflation, which we're going to talk about inflation and deflation here in a minute, but CPI, the Consumer Price Index, can be used to show inflation or deflation. They track prices of everything. For example, gas prices. If you can go back, and see gas prices for the past, 30, 40 years because of this CPI index they keep, this Consumer Price Index. It'll tell you how much things have been sold, how much gas has been sold for over the past 40 years, and also how much is being sold of that product. And that kind of gives you an idea of how well your economy is doing as well. Because the higher the price of things, usually, actually, the better your economy is doing, because people can purchase more of that. Okay? So, really, CPI and GDP are the two big economic indicators people use to measure how well an economy is doing. Today, on your progress chart, the first thing was to do your little graphic organizer, and that was the answer to the bottom two little bubbles. We said CPI can be used to measure inflation. So what is inflation? Inflation is a rise in prices or a general increase in how much things cost. It often occurs when consumer demand is high and supply is short. This makes producers charge more for their product. For example, when things can be sold for, or when the price of products increase, producers make more money. How do they make more money? Because as they sell each product, they bring in more, and as a result, they can buy more resources and produce more goods. Now, with more resources comes the need for more labor, and that labor comes from workers. So the good thing inflation does is it increases, or actually it lowers unemployment. Inflation lowers unemployment by having more workers. So inflation is bad for consumers, for people like me and you, because things cost more for us to buy. It is good for producers, because obviously they're making more money, but it also lowers unemployment. So inflation can both be a positive and a negative thing. You don't want rampant inflation, or where inflation is uncontrolled and you have just prices increasing at a huge number, but a little bit of inflation is okay, and it's kind of to be expected. If you ask your parents or grandparents, they can tell you all about inflation, because they can tell you about how inexpensive things used to be, or how things have changed in price. The opposite of inflation is called deflation. Okay? Deflation is when overall prices go down, or they decrease. This is very good for consumers. And it's very simple. Why? Because you can purchase more for the same amount of money. Okay? Let's say something this year costs $1 and next year it costs 75 cents. Well, you can buy more of that product than you could before, because you have more money. The problem with deflation is it's bad for producers because obviously they don't make as much. And when they don't make as much, less profits mean they cannot hire workers and may even have to lay off some workers. Deflation causes an increase in unemployment. Now remember, inflation caused a decrease in unemployment. Deflation does the opposite. It causes an increase in unemployment. So you see unemployment going up during deflationary periods. So just like inflation, deflation has positives and negatives. Ideally, you want the economy to stay, or not the economy, you want prices to stay the same. You don't want a lot of inflation, you don't want a lot of deflation. You want stabilized prices. Now that's one of the goals of our economy, which we've talked about and you've looked up before, is price stability. So deflation and inflation, although both have positives and negatives, you don't really want either. You kind of want it to stay about where it's at. The last little bullet we have to talk about today is called stagflation. Now stagflation is very bad. It is when you have unemployment and prices increasing at the same time. Now remember, inflation, you had prices increasing, but unemployment decreasing. And then with deflation, you had prices decreasing and unemployment increasing. So what happens when unemployment and prices rise at the same time? You have what's called stagflation. That's bad for both producers and consumers. You don't see a lot of periods of stagflation because it's really not a good thing. You know, the economy would be in trouble if we had a lot of periods of stagflation. But if you go back to like 2005, you can see a period of stagflation. Okay? So that's your notes for today. I know it was really quick and short. For most of y'all that were in class today, you got these. If you were not in class, this is a little wrap up of what we did. Don't forget to check your progress chart, which is posted on the website, and you can pick it up in class as well. There were 3 levels of things to do today, so make sure you get all those done. Make sure you have your opener done. It was very short, just like it is every day. So hopefully this will help, and tomorrow we will jump in, continue on, and we're going to talk about unemployment.